Alright, so today we're doing line graphs, learning about line graphs, and our goal is to be able to accurately interpret and draw line graphs. So for APK, the same data has been displayed in three different ways in the graphs below, so I'm going to show you three different graphs. And just have a look at the information in these three different ways that they're being represented, and try to, in your own words, explain some of the similarities and differences. So the data should be exactly the same, but they're just represented in three different ways. So maybe just quickly jot down what you think are the main similarities and differences between the column graph, the bar chart, and the pie chart. Okay, so our main focus today is drawing line graphs. And these are some of the things you need to keep in mind. So later on during this lesson, you'll be asked to draw a line graph. And these are the things you need to make sure you think of when you're drawing a line graph. So firstly, you need to use graph paper. The time always goes along the horizontal axis and the frequency along the vertical axis. Both axes should have an appropriate scale. So just making sure that the scale that you use is firstly appropriate and it needs to be accurate. So that's why we recommend you use graph paper. And the scale can be different on each axis. And include a heading at the top of the graph. So if any of these things are not clear to you, once you see a line graph, it'll become clearer. So this is an example of drawing a line graph and how you would do that if you're given a table of information like the one on this slide. So there's temperature change, there's different times and the temperature given to you in Fahrenheit, and you're expected to construct a line graph. So basically, as we said, the time goes on the horizontal axis, the frequency goes on the vertical axis, so in this case it's the temperature rise. You need a heading, so here the heading is temperature change, and you need to have the scale. So what we mean by that is, so we've started at 5 a.m. and then that's 3 hours later, 8 a.m. and then again 3 hours later, 11 a.m. and then again 3 hours later. So basically the scale is, it's every time increasing by 3. On the vertical axis, I start at 10 and then it's going up by 10s. So as long as your scale is consistent along one axis, that's the main thing. So you plot the points at 5 a.m. So here's my 5 a.m. I check the temperature, it's 40 degrees. So there's 40 degrees at 5 a.m. And then at 8 a.m. I've been told it's 50 degrees and so on. So I've then got a few dots on my graph and I connect the dots, and that's my line graph. The next thing you need to know is how to interpret a line graph. So for example, if you've been given a line graph or if you've drawn a line graph yourself, you need to be able to read the graph and interpret information based on the graph that you're seeing. So in this case, if the question says, what is happening between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m.? So I'm looking at 11 a.m., I'm here, 60 degrees, 2 p.m., still 60 degrees. So what's happening from 11 to 2? The temperature does not rise or drop. So the temperature stays the same. At what time is temperature recording starting? So at what time have they started recording the temperature? So they started recording at 5 a.m. And at what time does the temperature begin to drop? So here the temperature is rising, it's going from 40 to 50, 50 to 60, it's staying at 60, and that's where it first starts to drop. Oops. So I would say 2 p.m. So 2 p.m. is where we start seeing that drop in temperature. All right. So there's many more things that you can read and interpret from this graph, but these are just some examples of a few things that you can read from the graph. So you should be able to answer questions if you've been provided with a graph. So in your numeracy notebooks, what I expect you to do is to draw and interpret this line graph. So using the data given to you, you've been given months of the year, and you've also been told how much rainfall they've been getting in millimeters. So you have to plot a line graph on graph paper, and then you have to write down 3 things you can interpret from your graph. So visually look at your graph after you've drawn it, and you need to write down 3 points about what you can interpret looking at the graph. And also remember the key points to create a line graph. So that was on slide 4. If you can't remember it, please feel free to go back to that point. So just making sure when you draw it, you tick off all of those points that have been mentioned in order to draw a line graph. Right. Once you've done that, you need to go to Delch Learning, and you'll see the exercise for lesson 6, line graphs. You need to complete that on Delch Learning, but that's only after you have done the previous task in your numeracy notebooks. Right, and that's the goal review. Thank you.